Hello, Trinity family. This is Pastor Doer, and this is your Theology in Three. Today, I'd like to talk with you about something that I recently learned about in my studies, and that is the Stone Cone Temple. This is a temple in Uruk, many thousands of years ago, way back in time, and this is a very interesting temple because of its construction method. It's probably made out of mud bricks, maybe some field stones, but the outside of it is got a facade made out of stone cones. Now that sounds very odd, so here's what it is. They took some they made these cones and made them different colors. They're probably about this long, and they stacked them on the outside of the building to create patterns, to create a mosaic. It's very interesting looking from the outside, and we are not 100% sure which deity was worshipped or what all of the features inside of it were for. There's a pool inside of it. We don't know all of the ritual functions of the temple. But it's a very interesting building to look at. And what's super cool to me about it is what they did with it when they were done with it. So in the ancient world, usually a holy site was considered holy. The site itself was holy. So if the temple needed to be decommissioned or was in bad repair, they might tear it down and rebuild it on the same spot. And so what's cool about the Stone Cone Temple is they tear it down, but they don't rebuild it. They instead build a tomb over the top of it. Now, this is interesting because they've buried the temple like they would bury a person. And then that tomb remains until this day, and we found it. We've dug through the remains, and we've uncovered it. Now, what's interesting to me about this is there's another temple, and that temple is the Jerusalem temple that Jesus goes to. It's originally built by Solomon, then it is destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. It's rebuilt after the exiles return by Zerubbabel, and then Ezra and Nehemiah are a part of that as well. And then Herod the Great, he renovates it and makes it into probably its most glorious state. It was absolutely massive. That temple was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans, and it was never rebuilt. But another religion, the Islamic religion, built a shrine over the top of where it used to stand, and that's called the Dome of the Rock today. Now, this is all interesting to me because there's a question: what do you do with holy things when you're done with them? And temples, the Stone Cone Temple, apparently they buried it and they built a tomb for it. The Jerusalem Temple, they never were allowed to rebuild it by the people who've controlled it since. And so then this turns to, for me, it turns to John chapter 2, and Jesus is standing in the temple. And the context here is that Jesus had just gone into the temple, he'd flipped over the money changers, he'd driven out the people selling stuff, and the Jews want an accounting for why he thinks he's allowed to do that. And this is how the story goes. John 2, verse 18. So the Jews said to them, "What sign do you show us for doing these things?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking about the temple of his body. When therefore he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this and believed the scriptures and the words that Jesus had spoken. This is interesting to me because here Jesus is standing in the temple. He's just driven out the money changers, and the Jews are like, "Who says you can do this?" And Jesus says, "I'll destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days." And they're like, "What? That doesn't make any sense. It's taken over 40 years to build this." They're referring to Herod's renovations. That's what they're talking about. And so Jesus, he says, "I will rebuild it in 3 days." And it's not until after his resurrection that they understand, oh, he's not talking about the temple, he's talking about his body. Now, what we need to understand about temples in the ancient world is this. The temple was the place where the god lived. That Stone Cone Temple, there's a room in the back where they probably housed an idol. And that idol was the god. It lived in the house. It was the house of that idol. The Stone Cone Temple is a house. The temple in Jerusalem is considered the place where Yahweh's presence dwelled. In the days of Solomon, when he built the temple, the Ark of the Covenant rested inside the temple. And so that was the presence of God within that space. Now, when Jesus comes along and he says that he will rebuild the temple in 3 days, and he's referring not to the stone temple in Jerusalem, but to his body, he is saying the presence of God can be found in him, not in the place of the temple. So if people want to encounter God, they find him in Jesus. That is where you find God, not in the building, but in Jesus himself. And now there's one more parallel that I think is really interesting between Jesus and the Stone Cone Temple, and that's this. The Stone Cone Temple was buried. It was buried under a tomb. They left it there, and it remained until it was excavated by archaeologists thousands of years later. Jesus was buried. This temple was buried, but the whole point of Jesus' words in John chapter 2 is to say he's not going to stay buried, that he's going to be resurrected, that he's going to be raised to life. And so you and I have our hope in the person and work of Jesus, that he is not dead, that he is alive, that we can go to him anytime we want in prayer, and receive the means of grace from him in church, that we might hear the words of God and have those wash over us as they forgive us, rejuvenate us, and revive us. That we will live forever with him in heaven, and that in that temple we will be in the presence of Jesus forever. And so that's what I think is super cool about archaeology, is that there's some weird stories in the past, but they bear a pretty striking resemblance to things that have happened in the scriptures. So I pray that you have a blessed rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.